The cabin smelled like hot plastic and old breath when the boy stopped moving. For a second, no one understood what they were seeing. Then a woman screamed his name, sharp and cracked, and the sound cut through the aircraft like metal tearing. The plane had been sitting on the runway outside Phoenix for nearly 2 hours, nose pointed toward a sky that shimmered white with heat. The air conditioning hummed weakly, more suggestion than relief. In the back rows, the heat clung to skin. It pressed on chests. It made people irritable, slow, and careless. Careless enough to miss the moment when a child slipped from discomfort into danger. Row 34. 2 small bodies wedged against the window and middle seat. Identical haircuts. Identical navy hoodies tied around their waists. Unused because the cabin felt like an oven. Jordan Reed was the one who slumped first. His head tipped sideways, bumping softly against the window panel. His brother, Miles, noticed immediately. "Jordan, hey." "Jordan, wake up." Miles's voice stayed low at first. He had learned early not to draw attention, not on planes, not anywhere adults wore uniforms. But when Jordan did not answer, when his chest started rising too fast and then too shallow, something cold opened in Miles's stomach. Across the aisle, a retired electrician named Frank Bell looked up from his newspaper. He had flown this route for 20 years. He knew the difference between a tired kid and a sick one. He saw Jordan's lips, too pale, too dry. He smelled the air, too hot. Frank lifted his hand, signaling the aisle. "Miss," he called, trying to keep his voice calm. "That kid doesn't look right." The lead flight attendant stopped 3 rows away. Her name tag read Susan Hartley, late 50s, perfect posture, hair sprayed stiff enough to survive turbulence. She glanced at Jordan, then at Frank, then back to her watch. "We're delayed," she said flatly. "Everyone's uncomfortable." Miles stood up. He was 10 years old, skinny, shoulders too narrow for courage, but he stood anyway. "My brother needs water," he said. His voice shook, but he did not look away. "He feels really hot." Susan's eyes hardened. Not cruel, just dismissive. The kind of look people used when they had decided a story before hearing the end. "Sit down, honey. The seatbelt sign is still on." "He can't breathe right," Miles said, louder now. A murmur spread. Heads turned. Phones shifted in hands. Someone muttered about heat stroke. Susan's jaw tightened. She stepped closer, lowering her voice like a warning. "We do not serve beverages on the ground unless instructed by the captain. You need to sit down before this becomes a safety issue." Safety. The word landed wrong. Frank pushed himself halfway into the aisle. "I don't care about the coffee service. Get the kids some water. Or ice. Or call someone." Susan straightened fully now. Authority slid into her tone. "Sir, if you interfere with crew operations, I will have you removed." Removed? From a plane that was not moving. From a heat but was already hurting people. Miles looked down at his brother. Jordan's eyes were half open now, unfocused. His skin was hot and dry, no sweat left to give. His breathing made a thin, wheezing sound that did not belong in a child. "Please," Miles whispered. He grabbed the edge of Susan's sleeve without thinking. She pulled her arm back sharply. "Do not touch me." Jordan's body jerked once, then went slack. That was when the cabin shifted. The air changed, not physically, but emotionally. Panic has a smell. It spread fast. "He passed out," someone said. "No, that's not normal. Call for medical." Susan leaned over Jordan's face. She did not touch him. She did not check his pulse. She spoke loudly instead, as if volume could replace care. "Wake up! Hey, enough!" Jordan did not move. Miles made a sound that was barely human. He tried to unbuckle, but Susan caught his wrist. Her grip was firm, controlled. The kind of grip used by people who believed rules mattered more than context. Sit. Down. Then she reached up and twisted the air vent shut above their row. A small click. Plastic against plastic. "If he's cold," she said, not to Miles but to the watching cabin. "The airflow isn't helping." Frank stared at her. His mouth opened, then closed. He reached for his phone with shaking hands. In the cockpit, Captain Alan Brooks wiped sweat from his neck. The warning light for cabin temperature glowed amber on the panel. Not red. Not yet. The first officer glanced at him. "Ground control asked if we want to return to the gate," she said quietly. Brooks looked at the clock. If they turned back now, they would miss their departure window. Crew timing would get messy. Reports would be written. Meetings would follow. He imagined the emails, the phone calls. "We'll be airborne soon," he said. "It'll cool down once we climb." Behind him, the radio crackled. The tower repeated the offer. He did not answer. In row 34, Jordan stopped breathing. Miles screamed. That sound finally broke procedure. The call went out. "Medical emergency." The aircraft lurched, brakes locking hard enough to jolt bodies forward. Outside the windows, black SUVs cut across the tarmac, sirens silent but lights flashing. Not airport police. Not fire. Something heavier. Susan froze. For the first time since boarding, her face drained of certainty. The door opened. Heat rushed in. Then order followed. Paramedics moved fast, efficient. One of them dropped to his knees in the aisle, hands already on Jordan's chest. Oxygen mask, IV kit, words spoken in clipped phrases. "Core temp critical, no sweat, get him off, now." Miles backed away, shaking, his hands empty without his brother. Then the man stepped onto the plane. He was tall, early 60s, dark suit worn like armor. No rush in his movements, no confusion in his eyes. Just focus. Cold, sharp focus. Passengers felt it before they understood it. The shift. The way authority realigns a room. "Where are my sons?" the man said. It was not a question. Susan moved automatically, blocking the aisle. "Sir, you cannot be here. This is a secure aircraft." He did not slow down. He did not raise his voice. He walked past her like she was a chair left in the wrong place. Miles saw him and ran. "Dad!" The man's face cracked then, just for a breath. He knelt beside the stretcher, one hand hovering over Jordan, afraid to touch, afraid to break something fragile. "I'm here," he said. "I've got you." A paramedic looked up. "Sir, we're taking him to St. Luke's. Severe heat stroke. Minutes matter." The man nodded once. Then he stood. Susan found her voice again. "This delay is unacceptable. This whole situation was handled according to procedure." The man turned to her, really looked at her for the first time. "My name is Marcus Reed," he said. "I'm the chief executive officer of this airline." Silence fell like a dropped curtain. In that silence, every choice made in the last 2 hours came rushing back to find its owner. No one clapped. No one breathed. The words hung in the cabin like smoke after an explosion, thick and impossible to ignore. Marcus Reed did not wait for recognition. He stepped aside so the paramedics could move, his body angled protectively toward the stretcher, as if shielding it from the world. Jordan's face was slack under the oxygen mask, eyelashes resting too still against his cheeks. Miles stood frozen, staring, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles had gone white. Susan Hartley swallowed. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her training told her to regain control. Her instincts told her something else entirely. The room had shifted, and she was no longer standing on solid ground. Captain Brooks appeared at the cockpit door, his uniform collar damp with sweat. He took in the scene in a single sweep. The medics, the child, the man in the suit, the phones raised like witnesses that would never forget. His jaw tightened. "What's going on?" he demanded, though the question sounded weak even to him. Marcus turned slowly. His eyes met the captain's, steady and unblinking. "Your aircraft became a medical hazard," he said. "My son collapsed." Brooks glanced at Susan. She straightened reflexively, grateful for the instinct to align with authority. "We followed protocol," she said quickly. "The cabin was uncomfortable, but within acceptable limits. The child appeared to be exaggerating symptoms." A low sound moved through the passengers, not anger yet, something closer to disbelief. The paramedic nearest them looked up, sweat streaking down his temple. "That kid's core temperature is over 105 degrees, he said. "That's not exaggeration. That's organ failure." Susan flinched as if struck. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Who closed the air vent?" he asked. Susan hesitated for half a second too long. "I did," she said, "to regulate airflow." Frank Bell laughed. It burst out of him, sharp and humorless. "You shut off his air. I heard you." Susan spun on him. "Sir, you are not part of this conversation." Marcus held up a hand. The motion was small. The effect was immediate. Susan stopped talking. "You are," Marcus said to Frank. "You all are." He turned, addressing the cabin now, his voice carrying without effort. "If anyone here recorded what happened, I want you to keep that footage. Do not delete it. You will be contacted." Several people lowered their phones slowly, as if realizing only now how tightly they had been gripping them. The stretcher rolled toward the door. Miles followed, panic threatening to spill over into his legs, his breath coming too fast. Marcus caught him gently by the shoulder. "Ride with them," he said. "I'll be right behind you." Miles looked up. "You promise?" Marcus nodded. "I promise." The paramedics moved off the plane. Heat rushed back in their wake, but the cabin no longer noticed. Everyone was watching Marcus. Susan cleared her throat. "Mr. Reed," she began, reaching for professionalism like a lifeline. "I want to explain. We are under enormous pressure during ground delays. Passengers become disruptive. Decisions have to be made quickly." Marcus turned to her fully now. The silence deepened. "You made them," he said. "Every one." Captain Brooks shifted his weight. "Sir, with respect, this situation escalated beyond what anyone intended. I was not informed of a life-threatening emergency until moments ago." Marcus's gaze moved to the cockpit door behind Brooks. "The temperature warnings were logged," he said. "Ground control flagged your cabin conditions twice." Brooks stiffened. "Those were advisory." "They were documented," Marcus replied, "which makes them real." A bead of sweat ran down Brooks's temple. He wiped it away with the back of his hand, suddenly aware of how many people were watching him now. Not as a pilot, but as a man being measured. An airport operations supervisor boarded the aircraft, followed by 2 security officers. Their expressions were grave, controlled, not rushed. This was no longer a delay. It was an incident. "Captain," the supervisor said quietly, "we need to suspend this flight pending investigation." Brooks opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. The words did not come. He nodded once. Susan looked between them, confusion cracking her composure. "You can't just cancel a flight over this," she said. "This is an internal matter." Marcus met her eyes. "No," he said, "it's not." He stepped closer, not threatening, precise. "You did not deny my son a privilege. You denied him care. You made a judgment about his worth, based on his seat number, his age, and how inconvenient his suffering was to you. Susan shook her head, breath coming fast now. That's not fair. It doesn't have to be, Marcus said. It has to be true. One of the security officers spoke into his radio, voice low. The supervisor glanced at Susan. Ms. Hartley, he said, we're going to need you to step off the aircraft. Her eyes widened. Am I being detained? You are being removed pending review, he replied. Please cooperate. She looked to Brooks, to the uniform, to the structure that had always protected her. Brooks did not meet her gaze. Susan's shoulders sagged. She walked down the aisle stiffly, the sound of her shoes against the floor suddenly too loud. As she passed row 34, she slowed. The empty seats stared back at her, seatbelts twisted, air vents still closed. She did not look away. Marcus watched her go. Then he turned back to the cabin. I am sorry, he said. The words were simple, but they landed with weight. This should never have happened. To any of you. Not on my planes. A woman near the window began to cry softly.
Frank folded his newspaper with shaking hands.
Outside, the heat beat down on the tarmac, indifferent. Inside the airport, alarms were ringing quietly, processes activating, wheels turning that would not stop easily or soon. Marcus stepped off the aircraft, the roar of the runway giving way to the controlled chaos of emergency response. He followed the stretcher, his stride long and purposeful, his face carved from restraint. At the hospital, time fractured, minutes stretched. Doctors spoke in careful phrases, numbers were monitored, fluids rushed into small veins, machines hummed. Miles sat curled in a chair, his knees pulled to his chest. Marcus stood nearby, one hand resting on the back of the seat, grounding himself in the present. He did not sit. He did not pace. He waited. A physician approached at last. He's stable, she said. For now. We got his temperature down. The next 24 hours are critical. Marcus nodded. Thank you. She hesitated. Your other son should drink water, she added gently. Marcus turned to Miles. You hear that? He said softly. He held out a bottle. Miles took it with both hands, sipping carefully, eyes never leaving the hallway. Back at the airport, the cabin sat empty. Phones buzzed, messages spread. A story was forming, whether anyone wanted it to or not. And Marcus Reed, standing under fluorescent hospital lights, knew that what had happened in the air would not be contained on the ground. The news broke before sunrise, carried not by anchors, but by the low hum of phones lighting up nightstands across the country. A shaky video. A child slumped in an airplane seat. A uniformed woman closing an air vent with a sharp twist of her wrist. A boy crying, begging, unheard. The caption traveled faster than context ever could. Inside St. Luke's Medical Center, Marcus Reed watched the monitors rise and fall, each beep a thin line between relief and terror. Jordan lay still, beneath layers of tubes and wires, his small chest lifting with mechanical precision. The machines were doing what his body could not. Miles slept curled against the wall, exhaustion finally overpowering fear. A half-empty bottle of water clutched to his chest like something sacred. A nurse adjusted an IV and glanced up at Marcus. You should rest, she said gently. We'll call if anything changes. Marcus nodded, though he did not move. He had learned long ago that rest was a luxury afforded only when danger passed. And danger, he knew, was far from done. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He silenced it without looking. Then it vibrated again, and again. Finally, he stepped into the hallway and answered. They have your name, said the voice on the other end. Calm, professional. The voice of someone who had stood beside him during hostile boardrooms and regulatory storms. They have your company, and they have footage from at least 6 angles. Marcus closed his eyes.
Good, he said. Let them see. There was a pause. You understand this is going to escalate?
Yes, Marcus replied. That's the point. Back at the airport, the plane sat grounded at the far end of the tarmac, its doors sealed, its cabin lights dimmed. Investigators moved through the aisles with measured steps, photographing vents, seats, control panels. They spoke quietly, deliberately, like people handling something volatile. Captain Brooks sat alone in a small office near operations, staring at a blank wall. His uniform jacket lay folded on the table beside him. No epaulets, no rank, just fabric. He replayed the moment again and again. The warning light, the radio call, the decision to wait. He had made choices like that before, hundreds of times. This was the first time one of them had followed him off the runway. Susan Hartley sat in a different room, hands clasped so tightly her fingers ached. She had been offered water. She had refused it. She told herself she was fine.
She told herself this was a misunderstanding that would clear up once people calmed down.
The door opened. 2 officials entered, one from the airline's internal compliance team, the other wearing a badge she did not recognize. "Ms. Hartley," the woman said evenly, "we're going to ask you some questions." Susan straightened. "Am I being charged with something?" "Not yet," the woman replied, "but we need your account." Susan nodded, grateful for the chance to speak. She explained delays, passenger behavior, the difficulty of managing a full cabin in extreme heat. She spoke of procedure, of training, of maintaining order. She did not mention the air vent until they asked. "And why did you close it?" the man with the badge said. Susan hesitated. She felt suddenly cold. "I believed the airflow was aggravating the situation." The man did not react. "Based on what medical assessment?" Susan's mouth opened, closed. "My experience."
Did you consider that restricting airflow could worsen respiratory distress?
Susan's voice dropped. "I did not believe the child was in distress." The woman from compliance glanced at her notes. Multiple passengers reported visible symptoms, loss of consciousness, labored breathing. Susan's shoulders tightened. Passengers exaggerate. The man with the badge leaned forward. "So do people who are afraid," he said quietly. In the hospital, Jordan's heart rate spiked suddenly. A sharp alarm cut through the room. Nurses moved in fast, efficient, their voices calm but urgent. Marcus stepped back instinctively, his hands curling into fists at his sides. A doctor entered, her expression unreadable. She adjusted a monitor, spoke to the nurse, then turned to Marcus. "He's fighting," she said. "That's good, but his body is exhausted. We're going to put him into a medically induced coma to reduce stress on his organs." Marcus nodded once. He did not trust his voice. Miles stirred, blinking awake as the room shifted around him. "Dad," he whispered. "Is he okay?" Marcus knelt in front of him, lowering himself to eye level. "He's getting help," he said. "The best help." Miles swallowed. "She didn't listen," he said softly. "I tried." Marcus pulled him close, wrapping him in an embrace that trembled despite his control. "You did everything right," he said. "Everything." Outside the hospital, cameras gathered. Reporters spoke into microphones, their voices urgent, measured, sympathetic. Words like negligence and accountability filled the air. Analysts debated policy. Former flight attendants shook their heads on panel discussions. Parents watched from living rooms, their own memories rising uninvited. By midday, the airline's stock dipped sharply. By afternoon, the board requested an emergency session. Marcus arrived without entourage, his suit still wrinkled from the night before. The room fell silent as he entered. Dees looked up at him, some concerned, some guarded, some calculating. We need to address the public response, one board member began carefully. Marcus raised a hand. No, he said. We need to address the truth. He placed a tablet on the table and tapped the screen. The video played without sound. The images were enough. This is not a public relations issue, Marcus continued. This is a moral failure. A murmur spread. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Our procedures allowed this, Marcus said. Our culture tolerated it. And I will not defend either. One executive leaned forward. Marcus, with respect, making statements now could expose us legally. Marcus met his gaze. We are already exposed, he said. The question is whether we stand behind excuses or people. The room stilled. I built this company on the promise that safety is not a slogan, Marcus said. It is a responsibility. Effective immediately, that responsibility will be enforced. There were objections, concerns, legal caveats. Marcus listened. Then he spoke again. Anyone who believes this is an overreaction, he said calmly, is free to resign. No one did. Back at the hospital, Marcus returned to Jordan's bedside as evening fell. The room was quiet now, lights dimmed, machines steady. He took Jordan's hand carefully, mindful of the wires, the fragility. I should have been there, he murmured. I thought building something better was enough. The monitor beeped steadily, patient, unforgiving. Marcus straightened, his expression hardening, resolve settling into place like armor. What had begun on a runway was no longer just about a flight. It was about power, about who was protected, about who was ignored. And this time, Marcus Reed intended to make sure no one could look away. The morning Jordan woke up, the world did not feel changed. The light outside the ICU window was the same pale Arizona gold. The machines still hummed. The hallway still smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. For a moment, Marcus Reed thought he had imagined it. The slight movement, the shift that pulled him out of a half-sleep he did not remember entering. Then Jordan's fingers tightened around his. It was weak, barely there, but it was real. Marcus leaned forward so fast, his chair scraped the floor. Jordan, he said, his voice rough, unguarded. Hey, I'm here. Jordan's eyes fluttered. The lashes trembled, then parted just enough to reveal dark pupils, unfocused, drifting. His lips moved without sound. Marcus leaned closer, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack his ribs. I'm here, Marcus said again, softer. You're safe. A nurse was suddenly there, then another. Lights brightened, voices layered over one another, efficient, urgent, hopeful. Miles woke with a sharp inhale, his body jerking upright in the chair. He saw his brother's eyes and froze, afraid to breathe. Jordan? Miles whispered. Jordan turned his head a fraction. The movement exhausted him. His mouth worked again. This time a sound came out. Dry, broken, human. Water. The word landed like a blow. Miles burst into tears. Not loud ones, the kind that folded him inward, shaking, silent, his face pressed against Marcus's side. Marcus closed his eyes, one hand still holding Jordan's, the other gripping Miles's shoulder like an anchor. A doctor appeared at the foot of the bed. She checked the monitors, nodded once. That's a good sign, she said. Very good. He's still in danger, but he's fighting. Marcus nodded. He had learned to trust doctors. He had learned when to ask questions and when to listen. When can he drink? He asked. Soon, she said. Small sips, carefully. Miles reached for the water bottle on instinct, then stopped, looking at the nurse for permission.
She nodded. Miles held the straw to Jordan's lips with hands that shook but did not spill. Outside that room, the world did not pause. By noon, the video had crossed 50 million views. By mid-afternoon, it had crossed 100. People did not just watch it. They watched it again. They slowed it down. They argued over frames. They quoted it back to each other with disbelief and fury. Former pilots weighed in. Retired flight attendants spoke through tears. Parents wrote long posts about trust and fear and how quickly both could be destroyed. And Susan Hartley became a name no one wanted to say aloud. She sat alone now, no longer in a quiet interview room, but in a holding area that smelled of metal and stale air. The chair was bolted to the floor. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. She replayed her words again and again, searching for a version where they sounded reasonable, professional, defensible. They did not. Her phone had been taken. Her badge lay on a table somewhere, stripped of meaning. She thought of her career, of the flights she had worked through storms and turbulence, emergencies she had handled without panic. She told herself that should count for something. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the boy's face. Not angry, just empty. At airline headquarters, the boardroom doors were closed. Lawyers filled the room like shadows, their voices low, careful, precise. Marcus sat at the head of the table, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, his posture still, controlled. "We are cooperating fully," one attorney said, "but public statements must be limited." Marcus listened. Then he stood. "No," he said. The word cut cleanly through the room. "We will not hide behind language," Marcus continued. "We will not wait for outrage to fade. We will not reduce this to policy revisions buried in a report no one reads." A board member shifted. "Marcus, we are talking about exposure." Marcus looked at him. "I am talking about trust." Silence followed. Heavy, unavoidable. "This airline will ground any aircraft where cabin conditions exceed safe limits," Marcus said. "No exceptions, no delays, no calculations about cost. And that policy will be announced today." One lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. "We will also release the full timeline," Marcus went on. "Every warning, every ignored signal, including decisions made in the cockpit." Someone inhaled sharply. "We are not protecting reputations," Marcus said. "We are protecting people." When he left the room, his phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. "Jordan asking for you." Marcus did not answer the calls that followed. He drove straight back, traffic blurring past, his thoughts sharp, focused. He walked into the ICU room to find Jordan awake again, eyes clearer now, though still heavy with exhaustion. "There you are," Jordan said faintly. Marcus smiled. It felt unfamiliar on his face. "There I am." Jordan frowned slightly, confusion threading through the fog. "The plane," he said. Did we take off?" "No," Marcus said. "You didn't go anywhere." Jordan seemed to consider this. "Good," he murmured. "It was hot." Marcus nodded. "I know." Miles climbed onto the edge of the bed carefully, avoiding wires. "You scared me," he said, trying to sound stern, failing completely. Jordan's lips twitched. "Sorry." That night, Marcus stood at the window of the hospital room, looking out over the city. Lights spread in every direction, thousands of lives intersecting without ever touching. Somewhere out there, people were arguing online, filing reports, writing headlines, deciding who was guilty, who was responsible, who should pay. Behind him, his sons slept. Marcus rested his hand against the glass. He thought of the cabin, the heat, the moment authority had been mistaken for righteousness. He thought of how easily harm could hide inside routine. Tomorrow, investigations would deepen, charges would be filed, careers would end, systems would be dismantled and rebuilt. But tonight, the machines hummed steadily. Jordan breathed on his own. Miles slept without clutching a water bottle in fear. Marcus closed his eyes, just for a moment, and let himself feel something close to relief. Then he opened them again. The fight was far from over. The charges came quietly, without cameras or speeches. A folded document slid across a metal table, a pen placed beside it, words heavy enough to bend a life. Susan Hartley stared at the paper until the letters blurred, then steadied herself and signed. Her hand shook anyway. Child endangerment, reckless disregard, willful neglect. Each phrase felt colder than the room she sat in. She told herself this was not who she was. She told herself it had been a bad day. She told herself many things. None of them changed what had been recorded. Across town, Captain Alan Brooks stood in a different office, facing a panel that did not raise its voice. They did not need to. Their questions were precise. Timelines, readouts, communications logs. He answered carefully, choosing words like a man picking his way through broken glass. He explained the pressures, the expectations, the culture that rewarded keeping schedules tight and consequences abstract. He spoke of judgment calls and operational experience. When they asked him why he had not returned to the gate after the second warning, he paused too long. "I believed we could manage," he said at last. The panel thanked him. Then they asked him to wait outside. He sat alone in the hallway, hands folded, staring at the floor. For the first time in his career, the uniform on his back felt like borrowed clothing. At St. Luke's, Jordan's recovery came in inches. He woke, drifted, woke again. He learned the rhythm of the room, the gentle pressure of blood pressure cuffs, the quiet footsteps of nurses who spoke softly, as if volume itself could hurt him. His kidneys protested, then slowly began to cooperate. The doctors used careful language, improving, guarded, encouraging. Marcus listened without interrupting, filing every word away. Miles rarely left his brother's side. When nurses insisted he rest, he compromised by sitting just outside the door, back against the wall, watching the numbers on the monitor through the glass. He flinched at every alarm, even the harmless ones. Marcus watched him closely, seeing not fear now, but vigilance, the kind that settles into bones if left unaddressed. One afternoon, Marcus took Miles to the hospital cafeteria. They sat with untouched food between them. Miles stared at his hands. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked quietly. Marcus looked at him. "Why would you think that?" "I didn't make them listen," Miles said. "I couldn't help him." Marcus leaned back, studying his son's face. "Listen to me," he said. "You recognized danger. You spoke up. You did not freeze. Most adults don't even do that." Miles swallowed. "But she didn't care." Marcus nodded. "That's on her, not you." Miles nodded too, but slowly, as if accepting something heavy. Outside the hospital, the story continued to grow legs. Congressional aides requested briefings. Advocacy groups demanded hearings. Retired regulators wrote op-eds about complacency and culture. The airline's name trended for days, paired with words like trust and responsibility and failure. Marcus did not give interviews. He released statements, clear, unemotional, direct. He announced an independent safety review, led by people who had no reason to protect the company. He grounded roots when internal data raised concerns, ignoring the noise from investors and analysts who demanded reassurance. The stock dipped again.
Marcus did not flinch. In a conference room overlooking the city, he met with senior leadership. No slides, no theatrics, just decisions. "This is not about appeasement," he said. "This is about correction." One executive cleared her throat. "We are facing significant losses." Marcus met her gaze. "We were facing them already. We just chose not to see them." He outlined new authority structures, clear escalation paths, absolute medical override for cabin crew, no ambiguity, no room for interpretation when human health was involved. Training would change, evaluation would change, consequences would change. "Anyone who thinks kindness is optional in this industry is in the wrong industry," Marcus said. "That includes us." Back in the hospital, Jordan asked questions in bursts. About the plane, about why people were angry on television, about whether Susan Hartley was a bad person. Marcus considered before answering. "She made bad choices," he said, "and those choices hurt people." Jordan frowned. "Did she know it would hurt me?" Marcus hesitated. "She should have," he said. "That matters." Jordan nodded, absorbing this. "Will she say sorry?" "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. That night, Marcus stood alone in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. The voice on the other end belonged to a union representative. Tense, measured. "You are setting precedents," the man said. "This could have ripple effects." Marcus looked through the glass at his son sleeping. "Good," he said. "Ripples reach places waves never do." The call ended without agreement. In a courthouse across town, Susan Hartley's attorney reviewed evidence she could not dispute. The video, the witness statements, the internal training materials that contradicted her defense. He spoke gently, the way one does when delivering inevitability. "You should prepare for consequences," he said. Susan stared at the table. "I followed the rules," she whispered. He did not argue. He did not agree. He simply closed the file. At sunset, Marcus returned to the hospital roof for air. The heat of the day had faded, replaced by a breeze that carried the city's noise upward. Sirens, traffic, life continuing. He thought of the cabin again, the smell, the pressure. The moment authority had been confused with certainty. He thought of how easily people learned to look away when inconvenience was involved. A nurse joined him quietly. "Your son asked for you," she said. Marcus nodded and headed back inside. Jordan was awake, eyes clearer now, tracking the room with interest. "Dad," he said, voice still soft. "When I'm better, can we fly again?" Marcus stopped at the door. Miles looked up sharply. "You don't have to," he said quickly. "We don't have to." Marcus walked to the bed and sat. "Not today," he said, "and not soon. But one day, if you want to. On our terms." Jordan considered this. Then he smiled faintly. "Okay." Marcus took both his son's hands, one in each, grounding himself in the weight of them. Outside, reports were filed, timelines assembled, decisions scrutinized. Somewhere, someone would say it was too much, too harsh, too fast. Marcus did not care. Because for the first time since the runway, he could feel something steady returning. Not peace, not yet, but direction. And this time, he would not let go. 6 months later, the airport felt different to Marcus Reed, though he doubted anyone else could name why. The ceilings were the same. The floor still reflected the lights in long, polished streaks. Screens still flipped between destinations and delays. But something under the surface had shifted. A tension loosened, like a building after an earthquake that had finally settled into its new shape. Jordan walked beside him, a little thinner than before, a little quieter. He carried a small backpack and a clear bottle of water clipped to the strap. He did not let go of it. Miles noticed, but did not comment.
He walked on the other side of their father, scanning the space the way he always did now, alert but composed, older than his years in a way that both worried and impressed Marcus. They stopped at the edge of the terminal, watching a line of passengers board a narrow-body aircraft bound for the Midwest. The air coming from the jet bridge was cool. Not aggressive, not excessive. Just right. "Do you smell that?" Jordan asked softly. Marcus leaned closer. "What?" "Nothing," Jordan said. "That's good." Marcus smiled, then caught himself. He had learned not to let relief rush too quickly. He had learned patience the hard way. Behind them, a television mounted near a coffee stand replayed muted footage from a courthouse steps. Susan Hartley stood between two deputies, her hair pulled back, her face pale, her eyes hollow. The caption scrolled beneath her image, words stripped of drama, heavy with finality. Jordan glanced up at the screen, then away. "Is that her?" he asked. "Yes," Marcus said. Jordan nodded once. He did not ask more. The sentence had come down 3 weeks earlier. The judge had spoken slowly, deliberately, as if each word needed to be weighed before it was allowed into the room. Years of service acknowledged. Authority misused. Harm undeniable. The punishment was not theatrical. It was permanent enough. Susan had not cried. She had looked forward, jaw clenched, as if daring the world to soften. It had not. Marcus did not attend the sentencing. He read the transcript later, alone, at night. He closed the file when he reached the end, and did not open it again. Captain Brooks had lost his license. Not dramatically, not with headlines. The decision came by letter, mailed to his home address, stamped and signed. He appealed. The appeal failed. He sold his uniform online weeks later. No one bought it. The airline had survived. Barely, at first. Routes were cut, schedules reshaped, costs absorbed that would not be recovered quickly. Some investors left, others stayed. Marcus did not chase either group. The changes came quietly. New training protocols, independent climate monitors installed across the fleet, clear authority lines written in plain language, stripped of ambiguity. When a child needed water, they got water. When a cabin overheated, doors opened. No discussions, no exceptions. The culture resisted at first, not openly. In the small ways that resistance always showed itself. Delays blamed on weather, complaints about softness. Marcus listened. Then he acted. People adapted, or they left. On the morning of the airline's first annual safety briefing under the new system, Marcus stood in front of a hangar full of employees, pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, gate agents, faces lined with experience, faces still young enough to believe. "This job is not about efficiency," he said. "It is about trust. People step onto our aircraft believing we will care for them when they cannot care for themselves. That belief is not negotiable." No applause followed. That was fine. He had not expected any. Now, standing in the terminal with his sons, Marcus watched as a young flight attendant knelt to speak to an elderly woman struggling with her carry-on. The attendant smiled, listened, adjusted the bag without rushing. No one noticed. No one recorded it. That mattered more than anything else. Miles shifted beside him. "Are we going on this one?" he asked. Marcus nodded. "If you want to." Miles looked at Jordan. Jordan hesitated, fingers tightening briefly around the bottle. Then he took a breath. A real one. Full and slow. "Yeah," he said. "I think so." They joined the boarding line. No priority, no escort. Marcus had refused both. He wanted this moment to belong to them, not to his name. At the aircraft door, a flight attendant greeted them. Her smile was relaxed, genuine. Her eyes lingered on Jordan's bottle for a fraction of a second. Then she spoke. "If either of you need anything," she said, "please let me know. Anytime." Jordan nodded. Miles nodded too. Marcus met the attendant's gaze and inclined his head. She did not recognize him, or, if she did, she did not show it. They took their seats midway down the cabin.
The air flowed gently from the vent above. Not cold, just present. Jordan reached up and touched it, then pulled his hand back quickly, testing. He looked at Marcus. "It's okay," he said. Marcus settled into his seat. He watched the aisle fill, the bins close, the door seal. The quiet choreography of departure. As the plane pushed back, Jordan stiffened. Marcus placed a hand over his son's, firm and steady. Jordan nodded, eyes fixed forward. The engines spooled. The vibration hummed through the floor, familiar and strange at once. Jordan's breathing quickened, then slowed as Marcus matched it, counting silently until the moment passed. The plane lifted. Not dramatically, just enough to leave the ground behind. Jordan exhaled. A shaky laugh escaped him, surprising them both. Miles grinned, relief flashing across his face. "We're flying," Miles said. "Yes," Marcus replied. "We are." At cruising altitude, the cabin cooled slightly. A cart rolled down the aisle. The flight attendant stopped at their row and handed each of the boys a bottle of water, without asking for payment, without comment. Jordan stared at it, then smiled. "Thanks," he said. The attendant smiled back and moved on. Marcus leaned his head against the seat and closed his eyes, just for a moment. He listened to the sound of the aircraft, steady and sure. He thought of all the systems that had failed, and all the people who had stepped in to fix them. He thought of the cost and the responsibility that came with it. This was not redemption. It was not forgiveness. It was something quieter, more durable. Proof that change did not need spectacle to endure. When the plane touched down hours later, Jordan looked out the window and whispered, almost to himself, "That wasn't so bad." Marcus smiled. It was enough. The letter arrived on thick paper, heavy enough that Marcus Reed noticed the weight of it before he read a single word. It sat on his desk for a full hour, while the morning unfolded outside his office windows. Planes taxiing in quiet obedience, crews moving with practiced rhythm. He knew what the envelope contained. He had known it was coming. Knowing did not make opening it easier. The Department of Justice seal stared back at him, formal and unblinking. The language inside was careful, restrained, almost polite. Federal Oversight Review, industry-wide implications, voluntary testimony requested. The subtext was clear. What had happened on that runway was no longer just one airline's failure. It had become a mirror. Marcus folded the letter and placed it beside his keyboard. He did not call his lawyers right away. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and let himself remember the heat, the sound of panic, the exact moment when the line between inconvenience and danger had been crossed, without anyone in uniform noticing. Or worse, noticing and choosing not to care. By mid-morning, the calls began anyway. Regulators, advocacy groups, other airline executives speaking carefully, asking questions they pretended were hypothetical. Marcus answered what mattered and ignored the rest. He had learned that clarity did not require volume. At St. Luke's, Jordan's life had settled into something resembling normal. Physical therapy twice a week, checkups that still used words like monitoring and precaution, nights that sometimes ended with him sitting upright in bed, breath short, eyes wide, convinced the air was gone again. Marcus would sit beside him until the fear drained out, matching his breathing, grounding him in the present without forcing the past away. Miles watched all of it. He said little.
He listened more than he ever had before. His teachers noticed a change. Quieter confidence, sharper focus. He wrote an essay in school about rules, and when they mattered and when they didn't. The teacher called Marcus afterward, her voice uncertain, as if she was not sure whether to praise or worry. Susan Hartley watched the world shrink from a small room with cinder-block walls and a narrow window that showed only sky. Prison time moved differently. Days stretched, nights compressed. The sounds never stopped. She replayed conversations in her head until they lost meaning. She told herself she had been unlucky, that she had been singled out, that anyone else would have done the same. But the video played in her mind whether she wanted it to or not. The boy's face, the click of the vent, the sound of her own voice, cold and final. She learned quickly which thoughts to avoid. Some truths were too sharp to hold for long. Captain Brooks sold his house 3 months after the decision became final. He moved somewhere smaller, quieter. He stopped wearing watches. He slept poorly. He found himself waking at odd hours, reaching for alarms that no longer existed. When people asked what he did, he hesitated before answering. He had never hesitated before. The oversight hearing took place in Washington on a grey morning that smelled like rain. Marcus sat at the witness table, hands folded, posture straight, his voice steady as he answered questions that danced around blame without naming it. He spoke of systems, of incentives, of the difference between policy and practice. One senator leaned forward. "Do you believe this was an isolated incident?" Marcus did not answer immediately. He looked at the room, at the cameras, at the aides scribbling notes that would turn into narratives by nightfall. "No," he said. "I believe it was revealed, not created." A murmur moved through the chamber. He continued. The danger was always there. It just needed the right conditions to show itself. After the hearing, reporters gathered in a loose arc outside the building. Questions flew, accusations wrapped in concern. Marcus raised a hand. "I'm not here to defend my company," he said. "I'm here to change the industry." Someone laughed softly, not unkindly, but skeptically. Marcus met the sound without flinching. "Skepticism is healthy," he said. "Complacency is not." That evening, back home, Marcus found Jordan sitting at the kitchen table, a sheet of paper spread in front of him, crayons scattered around. He was drawing a plane. Not the sleek kind from commercials, a simple one. Square windows, big wings. The air vents were drawn carefully, one above each seat. "What's that?" Marcus asked. Jordan looked up. "It's the kind that doesn't forget people," he said. Marcus sat down beside him. "That's a good kind." Miles leaned in from the doorway. "You made the engines too small," he said critically. Jordan frowned. "They don't need to be big, just strong." Marcus watched them argue over details, over shape and color and purpose. He thought of boardrooms and hearings and letters with seals. He thought of how change actually happened. Not in speeches, not in punishment alone, but in memory, in vigilance, in children who noticed things adults missed. Later that night, Marcus stood on the back porch, the house quiet behind him. The sky stretched wide and dark, stars faint but present. His phone buzzed with a message from a regulator, thanking him for his candor. Another from an executive asking for advice. He did not answer either right away. He listened instead, to the night, to the distant sound of traffic, to the quiet certainty that what had begun as a single moment of cruelty had widened into something larger, something harder to ignore. The story was no longer just about a flight. It was about who paid attention and who never would again. The first whistleblower email arrived just after midnight, routed through a secure channel Marcus had approved months earlier and almost forgotten. It was short, careful.
written by someone who had learned the cost of being seen. I was on a flight last year where a kid fainted. Different airline, same delay, same heat, same response. Marcus read it twice, then a third time. By morning there were 4 more. They came from mechanics, junior flight attendants, dispatchers, even a retired gate supervisor who wrote with the precision of someone who had kept records long after anyone had asked him to. None of them used dramatic language. They did not need to. Patterns do not require adjectives. Marcus convened a small group that afternoon. No press, no board members. Just people whose careers had taught them where systems bent and where they broke. He did not sit at the head of the table. He sat among them, listening. "This isn't about one airline," a former FAA inspector said quietly. "It never was." Marcus nodded. "Then let's stop pretending it is." The following weeks unfolded like a slow unspooling. Internal reviews became external audits. Voluntary disclosures became mandatory inquiries. Airlines that had dismissed the Phoenix incident as an outlier began issuing statements that sounded eerily familiar, full of concern and commitment and carefully chosen ambiguity. Marcus refused to play that game. He released the data. All of it. Temperature logs, delay durations, incident reports that had been quietly closed without escalation. He did not editorialize. He let the numbers speak. They spoke loudly. At an industry conference in Denver, a senior executive from another carrier pulled Marcus aside near the coffee stand. His smile was tight, practiced. "You're making enemies," the man said. Marcus took his cup, black, no sugar. "I'm making changes." "You're destabilizing things," the executive insisted. "There's a balance." Marcus looked at him. Between what and who? The man hesitated. That was answer enough. In a suburban classroom in Phoenix, Miles gave a presentation on safety. He had chosen the topic himself. His teacher watched from the back of the room as he spoke clearly, hands steady, explaining how small signals mattered, how ignoring them added up. He did not mention airplanes. He did not mention his brother. But every word came from that place. Jordan watched from the hallway, peeking through the glass. He no longer startled at the sound of vents or fans. He still carried water everywhere, but now it was habit, not fear. The doctors said he would always remember what his body had felt like that day. Memory lived in muscle as much as mind. At home, Susan Hartley learned the rhythms of confinement. She learned when to speak and when to stay quiet. She learned which guards listened and which did not. She avoided mirrors when she could. She wrote letters she never sent. One afternoon, she received one. It was from a former colleague. Not sympathetic, not cruel, just honest. "I used to think you were tough. I see now you were careless with power. That scares me more." Susan folded the letter and placed it beneath her mattress. She did not cry. She felt something heavier settle in its place. Captain Brooks took a job driving delivery trucks. He liked the solitude, the predictability. He liked that the consequences of his decisions were immediate and visible. If he missed a turn, he corrected it. No one else paid for it. Sometimes, when traffic slowed and the cab grew warm, he cracked the window and thought about the amber light on the panel, about how close red had been, about how numbers were warnings, not suggestions. He did not tell anyone these thoughts. He carried them quietly. The federal report dropped in late autumn. It was dense, thorough, unsparing. It cited Marcus by name, not as a villain or a savior, but as a pivot point, someone who had chosen transparency over containment. The language was restrained, but the implications were not. Recommendations followed. Some adopted, some resisted, some ignored. Marcus accepted all of it without commentary. He spent more time now with engineers than executives, with trainers rather than lobbyists.
He walked through cabins unannounced, standing in the back rows where air used to stagnate. He listened. He asked questions. He watched how people behaved when they did not know who he was. One evening, Jordan asked him something unexpected. "Do you think people change because they want to?" he asked, "or because they have to?" Marcus considered. "Both," he said, "but the ones who last want to." Jordan nodded. He thought about this for a long time. On a flight to visit family in the Midwest, a passenger collapsed 2 rows ahead of them. The response was immediate. Calm, coordinated, water, oxygen. The captain returned to the gate without debate. No one complained, no one filmed. Jordan watched, heart racing, then slowing. He felt Miles's hand squeeze his own. Later, as they waited to reboard, Jordan leaned against Marcus.
"That felt different," he said.
Marcus kissed the top of his head. Because it was. The ripple Marcus had welcomed spread outward. Some airlines adopted reforms enthusiastically. Others dragged their feet until pressure forced their hand. The industry shifted, unevenly, imperfectly. But it shifted. At the end of the year, Marcus received another letter. This one handwritten. From a grandmother in Ohio whose grandchild had received water and care during a delay that would once have been brushed off. She did not mention policy. She mentioned kindness. Marcus placed the letter in a drawer with the others, not as trophies, as reminders. The story that had begun on a runway had become something larger than blame or redemption. It had become a question asked repeatedly, sometimes silently, sometimes aloud. Who is responsible when rules fail? And who steps in when they do? Marcus knew the answer would never be final. It would need to be chosen again and again. That, he understood now, was the real work. Winter arrived quietly in Phoenix, the kind that softened the edges of the city without ever truly cooling it. The nights grew longer. The air turned crisp just before dawn. From his office window, Marcus Reed watched the first flight of the morning lift into a pale sky, its ascent smooth and unremarkable. That, he had learned, was the goal. Nothing dramatic, nothing memorable, just people moving safely through the world. The injunction came 2 days later. It did not arrive by courier or announcement. It came as a filing, uploaded to a federal docket late on a Friday afternoon, when fewer eyes were watching. 3 major carriers, represented by a coalition of attorneys, sought to block the voluntary data-sharing framework Marcus had helped initiate, arguing it created unfair competitive pressure and exposed proprietary operations. Marcus read the brief once, then again, slower. The language was elegant, polite, dangerous. It spoke of market balance and regulatory overreach. It avoided words like heat and children and air. He closed the document and stood, walking the length of his office. Outside, the tarmac glowed under floodlights, a choreography of motion that depended on invisible trust. He knew this move. He had seen it in finance, in defense contracts, in industries that learned to protect themselves long before they learned to protect people. The phone rang. "They're trying to freeze the model," his general counsel said without preamble. "If they win, the disclosures stop." Marcus leaned against the window. "Then we don't let them win." "That means court," she said. "Public testimony, discovery." Marcus watched a ground crew guide a plane into position, their reflective vests flashing like signals. "Good," he said. "Let them look." The filing lit a fuse. Within days, airlines took sides. Some issued statements about unity and innovation, carefully neutral. Others pushed back harder, warning of job losses, rising costs, chaos. The language grew sharper. The industry closed ranks in places Marcus had expected openness. At home, Jordan felt the tension without understanding its source. He grew quieter again, hovering near Marcus in the evenings, listening to calls he could not hear. One night, after dinner, he asked, "Is something bad happening again?" Marcus knelt in front of him, searching his face. "Something hard," he said. "But hard doesn't mean bad." Jordan considered this. "Are people mad at you?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Some are." Jordan nodded, absorbing the weight of that. "That's okay," he said. "They were mad before." Miles watched from the doorway, arms crossed. He said nothing. He rarely did now, when the stakes felt real. The hearing date was set for early March. Washington again. This time, Marcus arrived not as a witness, but as a defendant. The room was larger, the crowd thicker. Representatives from multiple carriers sat shoulder to shoulder behind their counsel, faces composed, expressions unreadable. The judge entered. Proceedings began. The argument unfolded with practiced precision. Counsel spoke of unintended consequences, of safety theater, of data misinterpretation. They argued that Marcus's framework would force airlines into reactive decision-making, disrupt operations, increase cancellations. They never once mentioned the video. They did not need to. They assumed everyone had already seen it. When it was Marcus's turn, he stood slowly. He did not bring notes to the podium. "Safety is not reactive," he said. "It is anticipatory. It is what we do before someone collapses." Opposing counsel objected. The judge allowed him to continue. "This framework does not create chaos," Marcus said. "It reveals it. The data exists whether we share it or not. The question is whether we pretend it doesn't." A murmur moved through the gallery. "You are asking this court to protect your discomfort," Marcus continued, voice steady, controlled. "Not your passengers." Silence followed. The judge thanked him. Proceedings adjourned. Outside the courthouse, reporters pressed forward. Questions overlapped. Accusations sharpened. Marcus answered none of them. He walked past, his face calm, his stride even. That night, alone in a hotel room, he replayed the day in his mind. He thought of Susan Hartley, her world reduced to routine and regret. He thought of Captain Brooks, carrying his own reckoning in silence. He thought of the whistleblowers, still unnamed, still vulnerable. He thought of Jordan, breathing evenly in his sleep. The decision came a week later. The court denied the injunction. The ruling was narrow, procedural, careful not to overstep. But it was enough. The data-sharing framework would stand. Participation would expand. Oversight would deepen. The reaction was immediate. Airlines that had resisted shifted their tone. Statements softened. Committees formed. Consultants hired. Some of it was genuine. Some was performance. Marcus did not comment on which was which. He had learned that sincerity revealed itself over time. In Phoenix, Jordan returned to school full-time. He stopped sitting near the door. He joined a science club. He learned about systems, feedback loops, failure points. He liked experiments that involved measuring invisible things. One afternoon, his teacher called Marcus again. This time her voice was warm. "He's different," she said. "Focused. He notices things other kids don't." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. He always has. Miles, for his part, began volunteering at the community center, helping younger kids with homework. He never spoke about the plane, but when one child panicked during a fire drill, Miles stayed beside him until the shaking stopped, his voice calm, his presence steady. At airline headquarters, the first annual safety report under the new framework was released. It was not flattering. Incidents were up, reports more frequent. Headlines questioned whether things were getting worse. Marcus stood before the board and did not flinch. "They are being seen," he said. "That's not the same thing."
The following quarter, incidents dropped. Not because fewer happened, because fewer were allowed to escalate. One evening, Marcus found himself alone in a hangar, watching mechanics work beneath the belly of an aircraft. He listened to the echo of tools, the low murmur of voices. He felt the scale of it all again, the responsibility, the fragility. A mechanic looked up and recognized him, hesitated, then nodded once. "Sir," he said. Marcus nodded back. As he walked away, Marcus thought about how power moved, how it could be used to contain or to expose, how both required courage, but only one demanded accountability. The season turned. The industry shifted again, incrementally, unevenly. The story faded from headlines, replaced by others, louder, fresher, easier to consume. But in cabins across the country, something had changed. A warning light was no longer just a suggestion. A child's discomfort was no longer an inconvenience. And silence, once accepted, had become suspicious. Marcus Reed knew this would never be finished. No system ever was. It would require attention, repetition, the willingness to be unpopular. He was ready, because the measure of success was no longer profit alone. It was breath. The anniversary passed without ceremony, which was exactly how Marcus Reed wanted it. No statements, no interviews, no reminders pushed into the public eye. Just another clear morning at the airport, sunlight cutting across the tarmac, engines humming with restrained power, people moving from one place to another without knowing how close that simplicity had once come to breaking. Marcus stood near the observation windows with a paper cup of coffee cooling in his hand. Below him, a narrow body jet eased back from the gate. Ground crew signaled. Wheels turned. Everything worked the way it was supposed to. He had learned that the absence of disaster was not luck. It was effort made invisible. Jordan leaned against the glass beside him, taller now, shoulders less tentative. The bottle of water was gone. He still carried one some days, but it no longer defined him. He watched the plane taxi, eyes calm, curious, no longer searching for threat in every movement. Miles stood on Marcus's other side, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed but alert, the quiet steadiness of someone who had learned what vigilance really meant. "It's weird," Jordan said softly. "I don't think about it every day anymore." Marcus nodded. "That's how healing works." Miles glanced at the aircraft. "You still do." Marcus did not deny it. "I think about what could have been missed," he said. "That's my job now." They walked through the terminal together, unremarkable among the crowd. No escort, no recognition. Marcus had learned to value that anonymity more than any applause. Power, he understood, was loud only when it was insecure. At headquarters, the morning briefing moved quickly. Reports came in from operations, safety, training. Fewer incidents, faster responses. More interruptions of routine when conditions crossed invisible lines. Someone mentioned costs. Someone mentioned delays. Marcus listened, then spoke once. "We are not optimizing for comfort," he said. "We are optimizing for conscience." No one argued. In another city, Susan Hartley folded laundry in a room that smelled faintly of bleach and metal. The routine was rigid, the days numbered by bells and counts. She had stopped marking time by the calendar. She marked it by understanding instead. It came slowly, painfully, in moments she could not control. She no longer told herself she had been unlucky. She no longer told herself it had been a misunderstanding. She had learned the difference between authority and care, and it sat heavy with her now, an education she would never be able to use. Captain Brooks parked his delivery truck at the end of a long route, engine ticking softly as it cooled. He sat for a moment before getting out, hands resting on the wheel, feeling the quiet.
He still woke before dawn, still noticed temperatures instinctively. He no longer trusted himself with hundreds of lives, and in accepting that, he had found a strange kind of peace. Across the country, in classrooms and kitchens and airport lounges, people told versions of the story. Most had the details wrong. Some missed the point entirely. Marcus had stopped trying to correct them. Truth did not require perfect retelling to have impact. It required only enough clarity to change behavior. Jordan's school held a small science fair that spring. His project was simple: a box, a fan, sensor that lit up when heat crossed a certain threshold. He explained it calmly to anyone who asked, showing how small changes in airflow made the difference between comfort and danger. He did not mention airplanes. He did not need to. Miles volunteered at the same community center every weekend, helping kids who reminded Marcus uncomfortably of who his sons might have been without intervention. He spoke gently. He noticed when someone got too quiet. He handed out water without being asked. One evening, Marcus sat alone in his office long after the lights on the tarmac had come up. He opened a drawer and removed a stack of letters tied neatly with string. Notes from strangers, parents, flight attendants, mechanics, people who had noticed something change and wanted it known. He did not read them often, only when he needed to remember why the work mattered on days when resistance grew subtle and persistent. His phone buzzed with a message from a junior manager asking whether to escalate a minor temperature anomaly on a regional flight. It would mean a delay, complaints, paperwork. Marcus typed back 2 words: escalate now. Outside, the plane returned to the gate. Doors opened. Passengers disembarked. Someone grumbled. Someone thanked a crew member. A child ran ahead of a parent, laughing. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Not in relief, in acknowledgement. Later, at home, the house was quiet. Jordan slept with the window cracked open, the night air cool and steady. Miles had left a book open on his desk, forgotten mid-page. Marcus moved through the rooms without turning on lights, the way one does when peace feels fragile and worth protecting. He paused at the back porch and stepped outside. The sky was wide and dark, stars scattered thinly but honestly. He thought of the first moment on the runway, the heat, the sound of panic, the cost of silence. He thought of how easily systems learned to protect themselves and how rarely they learned to protect people without being forced. That force had come from many places, from witnesses who did not look away, from professionals who spoke up despite fear, from a child who asked for water and refused to be quiet. Marcus understood now that leadership was not about being seen at the center of a story. It was about standing still, long enough for others to move safely around you. It was about making the right choice so routine that no one noticed it had been made at all. The world would move on. Headlines would fade. New failures would demand attention. That was inevitable. But somewhere, on a delayed flight under a hot sky, someone would open a vent without hesitation. Someone would hand a child a bottle of water without thinking twice. Someone would choose care over convenience, not because of policy, but because it felt wrong not to. That was enough. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to like and subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments with 3 simple words. Tell your story.